called The Heart of Worship, where we've been trying to investigate what real worship is all about. Some of you who are familiar with churches, you've grown accustomed to this concept that worship is about music. I've got to tell you some of my own personal history when it comes to music. My mom has a memory of me when I was a little kid. I'm like 3 years old, maybe 4 years old, something like that. My mom has a memory of me where I was in Sunday school and she walked into the room from the back. And I didn't see her, but she saw me. And in the Sunday school time, we were singing a song. And I don't remember the song, but my mom has told it to me over and over and over again that I remember the gist of it. And it was something like, whatever you want me to do, God, I will do. Wherever you want me to go, I will go. Whatever you want me to say, I will say. Whatever you want me to do, I will do. I don't remember the song, but my mom has told me this time and time again. It's one of her proudest moments as a mom, and it happened when I was 3. So we've come a long way since then. So it's one of my mom's proudest moments, and I know part of it is that she heard in my young voice the words being sung, and she was hoping they were true, that I was saying to God, whatever you want me to do, I will do, and she was hoping they were true. But more than that, I believe my mom probably was proud of me because it was singing, and my mom was a singer. See, my mom wasn't just a singer. She was the singer in the church. I mean, it was obvious to me that the people in the church thought she was the best vocalist. She was a soprano, a high soprano, and the choir director spent more time with her than anyone else, coaching the voice, and then putting her in front of the congregation to do solos. Whenever there was a choir thing that was being done, she was always the lead soprano. She always had the solo. Whenever there was a small ensemble, she was always the lead soprano, always the one with the solo. Whenever the church did special music, it was always my mom up on stage with the solo. And she was the one singing, and it wasn't just at church. She sang at home, she sang in the car, she sang all the time, and it irritated me. And I remember one time as a kid, my mom did this thing with her voice where it kind of went like this, and it warbled a little bit, And as a kid, I was like, Mom, why does your voice go up and down? And she goes, that's called vibrato. Apparently, it's a desirable trait. And she explained this to me, and I said, okay, but inside, it irritated me. And then one day we were sitting in the church service, and we were holding these books called hymnals. I don't know if you're familiar with these things. They're books, they have music in them and lyrics and stuff. And we were holding these books, and I was trying my best to read the words because they're not all together. Like there's one line of one verse is in this section, and then the same verse has the second line in another section, and so you have to jump between all these different sections. So I was learning how to read, I was reading, I was doing my best, I was hearing the piano, I was singing the song as much as I could, standing next to my mom, and she was singing different notes. I was singing the right notes, and then she was all off higher than me, doing some other kind of different notes. And I remember asking my mom later, I was like, Mom, what is that? She goes, I was singing harmony. And I accepted it, but inside it irritated me. I was like, and so I had a growing distaste for music my entire early years, up until mid-junior high. In fact, in junior high, I went to a Christian school and we had chapel every week. And in chapel, someone would be on stage and they'd be leading us in singing, and there'd be words on a screen. And by that point in time, my church had switched. They were going through this sort of worship debate on whether we should use the books or whether we should use a slide projector. And so I was the slide projector dude, and I would click through the slides, and it was an actual physical slide projector, where you click and the slide would go, do they make those anymore? So it would go on a screen, and the words would be on the screen, and I'd be clicking through it and everything. And so the words were easier, but I still wasn't interested in all this stuff. And I remember thinking in junior high, in a chapel service, why do we bother with this music stuff? I mean, after all, my dad was the pastor of this church, and I thought the whole reason we were at the church was so he could get up and talk. And so why do we wait 20 minutes before he gets up and talks? If he just got up and talked, we'd be out of here earlier. If we got there, he did his thing, it'd be only half an hour, we're done. You don't need a call to worship from the choir or anything. So my journey of music really began with me just saying, I'm not so interested. at all. And I asked the question, why do we have it? I'll tell you a little bit about my journey, how it ended up in just a moment, but today I want to take us on a journey through the Bible to try to decipher why music is important. And we're only going to look at one passage that talks about music. We're going to look at a couple other passages first as we get into this whole notion. But in order to do that, let's just review where we've been. Our definition of worship, it's printed on your note sheet there. Our definition of worship is that worship is what happens when I, by words, attitudes, and actions, express God's supreme value. If He is the most valuable thing in the world and I express it somehow, that's called worship. Because worship effectively just means I'm ascribing worth to someone or something. So when I say how good God is, that's worship. The first week we were in this series, we learned that the heart of true worship is a mind that meditates on God's Word. Then last week we learned at the heart of true worship is a prayer that asks God to be God and patiently expects Him to do so. And today I'm going to give you the punchline right now. Today we're going to learn that at the heart of true worship is the recognition that a supremely valuable God deserves an extravagant response, and nothing else matters. A supremely valuable God deserves an extravagant response, and nothing else matters. So today we start our journey way back at Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, that's the mountain that went up in flames. That's the mountain where God descended in flames and fire and smoke. And it's the mountain where God told the people, don't come too near this mountain or you will die. Moses and Moses alone can come up to this mountain. And so Moses went up to the mountain and he received the 10 Commandments up there. But God also gave him some other instructions. And what I want you to do with me is to read the Bible in a very fast way. In fact, flip back to Exodus chapter 25. If you're using the Bibles we have here, it's on page 56. Did I say 56? 56. Exodus 25. Flip back there, and we're going to read all the way through chapter 33. But we're only going to be reading the topic sentences from each of these paragraphs. Just the first sentence, or maybe the first two sentences. I know you had elementary school, so you know what a topic sentence is. So we're going to just read a few selections of this whole thing. And just try to pay attention to the level of detail God requires when He has His people worshiping Him. See, what God is about to do is He's about to tell Moses how these people worship me. God is going to say, these are all the things you need to do if you're going to worship me well. And it begins with building a tabernacle, a tent, a sanctuary, a place for them to worship God. So the Lord says to Moses, tell the Israelites to bring me an offering. Oh my goodness, it starts with money. You are to receive the offering for me from everyone whose heart prompts them to give. Not under compulsion, but cheerfully. These are the offerings you're to receive from them: gold, silver, bronze, blue, purple, scarlet yarn, fine linen, goat hair, ram skins, dyed red, and another type of durable leather, acacia wood, olive oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil and for the fragrant incense, onyx stones and other gems to be mounted on the ephod and breastpiece. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then have them make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell among them. Make this tabernacle and all its furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you. So I read that whole section because this sets it up. God is going to give the instructions for the place of worship. Now just the opening sentences. Have them make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, 1.5 cubits high. Overlay it with pure gold, inside and out. And then it gets more details. Cast rings around the outside and insert poles into the rings and put the tablets of the 10 Commandments in the ark. Now verse 17. Make an atonement cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide, and make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold at the ends of the cover, going on to 23. Make a table of acacia wood, 2 cubits long, 1 cubit wide, and 1.5 cubits high. Overlay it with pure gold and make a gold molding around it. Make a lampstand, 31, of pure gold. Hammer out its base and shaft, and make its flower-like cups, buds, and blossoms of one piece with them. Verse 37, then make 7 lamps and set them up on it, that they may light the space in front of it. Its wick trimmers and trays are to be of pure gold. Chapter 26, make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of finely twisted linen and blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, with cherubim woven into them by a skilled worker. God doesn't just want a curtain. He wants good curtains. He doesn't want some half-hearted dude who happens to have some extra fabric laying around in his garage saying, I got a sewing machine, and he sews it together with just whatever he can put together. No, he says a skilled worker. I want good stuff. Make 10 of them. All the curtains are to be the same size. Let's skip down to verse 7. Make curtains of goat hair for the tent over the tabernacle. 11 altogether. More curtains. All the curtains are to be the same size, 30 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. Skip down to verse 15. Make upright frames of acacia wood for the tabernacle. Even the frames get details. Verse 26. Also make crossbars of acacia wood. 5 for the frames on one side of the tabernacle, 5 for those on the other side, and 5 for the frames on the west at the far end of the tabernacle. Verse 30. Set up the tabernacle according to the plan shown you on the mountain. Do my plan. Make up your own stuff. Do my plan. 31. Make a curtain of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, finely twisted linen, with cherubim woven into it by a skilled worker. There it is again. Verse 36, for the entrance of the tent, make a curtain of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and finely twisted linen, the work of an embroiderer. Now this curtain needs to have, after you make it from a skilled worker, give it to another dude who knows how to embroider, and have him sit there for hours and hours and hours doing that needle thing up and down, over and over and over again. God says, listen, if you're going to make me a curtain, it better take you some time. It better cost you some money. It better have some guy with carpal tunnel syndrome at the end of this thing, or else it ain't all the way there. Chapter 27, build an altar of acacia wood, 3 cubits high, it's to be square. Verse 9, make a courtyard for the tabernacle. The south side shall be 100 cubits long, and it's to have curtains of finely twisted linen with 20 posts and 20 bronze bases with silver hooks and bands on the posts. Verse 12, the west end of the courtyard shall be 50 cubits wide. Verse 16, for the entrance of the courtyard, provide a curtain 20 cubits long. Verse 20, command the Israelites to bring you clear oil of pressed olives for the light, so that lamps may be kept burning. Verse 28, have Aaron your brother brought to you from among the Israelites. Make sacred garments, verse 2, for your brother Aaron, and to give him dignity and honor. Tell all the skilled workers to whom I've given wisdom in such matters, that they are to make garments for Aaron for his consecration, so he may serve me as priest. And then we get details of the garments. And here in verse 6 it says, make an ephod of gold and of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn. An ephod is like an apron. But it goes over the front and it goes over the back, not on the sides. Okay? So it's like it drapes around you and it just hangs over the front and it hangs over the back and it probably comes down to about here. It's just like a colorful thing that someone might wear, like a cummerbund. We wear it for tuxedos. Some dudes wear vests or a tie. Those things are pointless in terms of clothing, but they give you color. So here's this ephod, and it's part of this decorative piece that God wants the priests to wear. Then they've got other clothes that go on around it too. You see some of these other things. Verse 9, take onyx stones and engrave on them some stuff and put them on the ephod. Verse 15, fashion a breastpiece for making decisions, the work of skilled hands. I don't have time to get into that. Verse 22, for the breastpiece make braided chains of pure gold like a rope. Skip down to verse 29. Whenever Aaron enters the holy place, he will bear the names of the sons of Israel over his heart on the breastpiece of decision as a continuing memorial before the Lord. Man, the details just keep on coming. Verse 31, make the robe of the ephod entirely of blue cloth. Verse 36, make a plate of pure gold and engrave on it as a seal, holy to the Lord. And that gets stuck on his head. The hat that he wears, the turban that he wears, that gets that. Verse 39, weave the tunic of fine linen and make the turban of fine linen. Verse 42, make linen undergarments. Skip to chapter 29. Even the underwear, by the way. Even the underwear. God's like, I want you to make underwear my way. Okay? This is crazy. Verse 1, this is what you're to do to consecrate them. And then all of chapter 29 is a description for a service that is going to be done to set up Aaron and his sons as the high priests. Chapter 30, we learn about the altar. Then we learn about, in verse 11, we learn about money. Then in verse 17, we learn about a washing basin. Then in verse 22, we learn about oil. Then in verse 34, we learn about incense. And we finally come to 31. And check this out. Then the Lord said to Moses, see, I have chosen Bezalel son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding, with knowledge, and with all kinds of skills, to make artistic designs for work in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of crafts. Moreover, I've appointed Aholiab, son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, to help him. Also, I've given ability to all the skilled workers to make everything I have commanded you. God spends chapters describing all the details for Moses. And he says, by the time you get back down to the bottom of this mountain, I want you to find two dudes, Bezalel and Aholiab. You know their dads, you know their families, you know how to find them, because those guys have it going on to do all the stuff that I just told you to do, because I put my Spirit in them. Here's the thing. The first principle we need to come to when it comes to worship is the recognition that God is so big, He's so valuable, He's so awesome, that all of our decorative extravagance doesn't match His worth. In fact, I put it this way. God called for extravagant skill, and then He empowered the people to do it. Then He empowered some of the people to provide it. When we come to worship God, there needs to be an element of skill on display. There needs to be an element of our best is coming to the table here. And not just an element of this is as good as I can do. But if I can't do very well, I'm going to find someone else who can do even better. And I'm going to say, listen, has the Holy Spirit of God impacted your life so much that you can do this thing skillfully, well, with excellence? If so, by all means, let's bring that before God. We bring our best. And even find that which is better than what we can bring. Jesus speaks to Moses on that mountain and says, when you worship me, bring your best. Let's go on. That's extravagant skill is one component of worship. In Mark chapter 14, we get another picture of extravagance. Mark 14, beginning in verse 1, we read this. Now the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were scheming to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him, but not during the festival, they said, or the people may riot. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. I don't know what nard is, but it was really expensive back then. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her harshly. This perfume, this bottle of perfume was worth $55,000. This bottle of perfume was worth $55,000. And she broke it and poured it on the dirt, hitting Jesus in the process. That's what these guys are thinking. These guys are thinking, that perfume ended up on the ground. And Jesus says, leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. He makes it sound like a small thing. She did what she could. That's as much as she could have done. These guys are thinking, she did way too much. Jesus says, she did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she's done will also be told in memory of her. That line touches me deeply when Jesus says, leave her alone. She has done a beautiful thing to me. Jesus says $50,000 is just what she could. $50,000, a whole year's salary, is just barely enough to qualify as a beautiful thing. She's done a beautiful thing to me. I put it this way on your sheet. Jesus is honored by an extravagant expense. He's worth so much more. $50,000 in the time span of 2 minutes is still not enough. Go to the Old Testament again. 1 Chronicles chapter 15. 1 Chronicles chapter 15. I'll set up the story for you just a little bit. What happens is the Ark of the Covenant was kidnapped, was captured, was taken away from the people of Israel by the Philistines. And then at one point in time, the Israelites, David led them to recapture the ark. But on their way to bring the ark back into Jerusalem, it began to tip over, and a dude reached out his hand and touched the ark. And God had said only the priests are to carry the ark in this proper way. They weren't carrying the ark in the proper way. It began to tip. The guy reached out. He touched it. When he touched it, he died. He died because that was outside of God's will for what that needed to happen. God needed to demonstrate that He was holy, and you follow His plan or you don't follow any plan. So the guy touched it and he died. So then they left the ark at the nearest house. And this is years later when David says, hang on a second, the ark doesn't belong in some dude's garage. This is the Ark of the Covenant of God. We need to bring it to Jerusalem where the tabernacle is. And so David sets up a place for it. And now when we get to this, chapter 15, David is getting ready to bring the Ark into Jerusalem. See what happens. After David had constructed buildings for himself in the city of David, he prepared a place for the Ark of God and pitched a tent for it. Then David said, no one but the Levites may carry the Ark of God. Aha! He's paying attention to the rules now. Because the Lord chose them to carry the ark of the Lord and to minister before Him forever. David assembled all Israel in Jerusalem to bring up the ark of the Lord to the place He'd prepared for it. And check this out. The word preparation, I want you to keep in your mind as I read the rest of this. Preparation. He called together the descendants of Aaron and the Levites, from the descendants of Kohath, Uriel the leader, and 120 relatives, from the descendants of Merari, Asaiah the leader, and 220 relatives, from the descendants of Gershom, Joel the leader, and 130 relatives, from the descendants of Elizaphan, Shemaiah the leader, and 200 relatives, from the descendants of Hebron, Eliel the leader, and 80 relatives, from the descendants of Uzziel, Aminadab the leader, and 112 relatives. Then David summoned Zadok and Abiathar the priests, and Uriel, Asaiah, Joel, Shemaiah, Eliel, and Aminadab the Levites. He said to them, you are the heads of the Levitical families. You and your fellow Levites are to consecrate yourselves and bring up the ark of the Lord, the God of Israel. Did He need all those people to bring up the ark? I don't know. I mean, you need 2 guys in front, 2 guys in back, right? You're going to bring the ark up to the place I prepared for it. It was because you, the Levites, did not bring it up the first time that the Lord our God broke out in anger against us. We did not inquire of Him about how to do it in the prescribed way. So the priests and Levites consecrated themselves in order to bring up the ark of the Lord, the God of Israel. And the Levites carried the ark of God with the poles on their shoulders, as Moses had commanded in accordance with the word of the Lord. David told the leaders of the Levites to appoint their fellow Levites as musicians to make a joyful sound with musical instruments, lyres, harps, and cymbals. So the Levites appointed Heman, son of Joel, from his relatives, Asaph, son of Berechiah, and from their relatives the Merarites, Ethan, son of Cushiah, and with them their relatives next in rank, Zechariah, Jaaziel, Shemiramoth, Jehiel, Uni, Eliab, Benaiah, Maaseiah, Mattithiah, Eliphilu. That one's awesome. Elihu. Micaiah, Obed-Edom, and Jael, the gatekeepers, the musicians Heman, Asaph, and Ethan, were to sound the bronze cymbals. Zechariah, Jaziel, Shemiramoth, Jehiel, Uni, Eliab, Maaseiah, and Benaiah were to play the lyres, according to Alamoth. And Mattathiah, Eliphelehu, Micaiah, Obed-Edom, Jael, Azaziah were to play the harps, directed according to Sheminith. Kenaniah, the head Levite, was in charge of the singing. That was his responsibility because he was good at it. I just added that. He said he was skillful at it. Berechiah and Elkanah were to be the doorkeepers for the ark. Shebuniah, Joshaphat, Nathanael, Amasiah, Zechariah, Benaiah, and Eleazar, the priests, were to blow trumpets before the ark of God. Obed-Edom and Jehiah were also to be doorkeepers for the ark. I just got to tell you something. That is a heck of a lot of planning to bring a box into town. Because that box was the Ark of God. And it represented the presence of God. And David says, this ain't nearly extravagant enough. And they're ready to bring this in. Let me just put it to you this way. David commissions extravagant cooperation. Extravagant cooperation. But then it gets a little crazy. Read the next few verses with me. So David and the elders of Israel and the commanders of units of 1,000 went to bring up the ark of the covenant of the Lord from the house of Obed-Edom with rejoicing. Because God had helped the Levites who were carrying the ark of the covenant of the Lord. 7 bulls and 7 rams were sacrificed. Now David was clothed in a robe of fine linen, as were all the Levites who were carrying the ark. And as were the musicians and Kenaniah, who was in charge of the singing of the choirs. David also wore a linen ephod, that apron thing. So all Israel brought up the ark of the covenant of the Lord with shouts and with the sounding of ram's horns and trumpets and of cymbals and the playing of lyres and harps. As the ark of the covenant of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window. And when she saw King David dancing and celebrating, she despised him in her heart. Here's a person who is expressing extravagant worship, and someone standing nearby them is despising them. I think I saw the same thing in the disciples when the lady cracked a bottle of perfume. But it's not just that. We have to skip over to 2 Samuel to get the rest of the story. 2 Samuel tells us the same story with a little bit different level of detail. Chapter 6, verse 12. So just flip on over there. 2 Samuel, chapter 6. Beginning in verse 12. Now, we're going to skip down and pick it up in verse 14. Wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window. And when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. Skip down to verse 20. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would." Apparently in his dancing, the ephod, which covers the front and the back, was not necessarily well wrapped around him in the middle. And she was embarrassed. David said to her, "It was before the Lord who chose me rather than your father, or anyone from his house when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by those slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor." And David's response is, "I don't care how I look in front of other people when I'm worshiping God. I don't care. There's an ark. The presence of God is coming to this city, and all those guys were playing the instruments, and it was good. And all that noise was happening, and it was awesome. And I was at the front of the line, and boy howdy, I just tell you, I lost it. I was just dancing. And it was before the Lord, not you. I'm not dancing for you. I'm dancing just because I got to do something. I gave all the instruments to everybody else. I gave all the singing to the people who are better than me. What else am I going to? I just got to dance. And he dances with all his might. This is all he had. David is the one who organized the entire thing. David is the one who planned it all. David is the one even who wrote the song they were singing. But when the time came, he just let loose and was dancing. I put it this way. David offers an extravagantly surrendered self. He says, my whole being belongs only to God. Only to God. The lesson is extravagance. Worship of a supremely valuable God means we should be extravagant kinds of people. But if the lesson is extravagance, the application for us today is music. Go ahead and jot that down. If the lesson is extravagance, the application for us today is music, because music is the one thing where you can do all this other extravagance at the same time. Skill. You need skill if you're going to do music well. In fact, last year, for most of 2012, we had some better vocalists in the church, and so I stepped out of this microphone situation, and I was actually standing in the back. Jake had me playing the bass a couple weeks. And then, just recently, Jake told me, I'm not allowed to play the bass anymore. Why? Because we value skill around here. You know what I'm saying? So Jake says, you can't get back there anymore. I said, come on, man, why? And he was going, you were doing the do-do, do-do, do-do thing. And I was like, yeah, that's right. You know, you're supposed to do da-da, da-da, da-da. And I was like, really? And so anyway, he says, I can't get back there again. Because we value skill around this place, okay? So skill's one thing. Expense. Listen, our soundboard was dying just a couple weeks ago. And we began talking about what it was going to take for us to replace the soundboard. And boy, howdy, those things are expensive. It cost $3,000 to do a soundboard. Well, about a month ago, there was a very generous family in the church that called me up and said, I heard a rumor you're looking for a new soundboard. How much does that cost? I said, $3,000. And they said, well, we can put in $1,000. And I said, are you nuts? And they said, no, we want to do it. So we have a new soundboard today. And it cost $3,000. We put money into our worship, into our music, all this stuff up here. Dude, if Joe just told you how much his gear was worth, you would, I'm not even going to say what you would do, but you'd just stand there and be like, duh. And he didn't even buy it. It was given to him. I'm not even telling you all that. But anyway, so here's the deal. It's expensive, all right? It's expensive. It's extravagant. But there's something else that's going on when we get together and we play music. There's a whole world of extravagance that happens up here in the planning and the cooperation. And there's a whole world of extravagance that happens in the preparation of the writing the songs and finding good songs and buying good sound equipment and whatnot. But there's a world of extravagance that needs to happen out here. And I'm going to ask you today to do so. We saved 4 songs for the end. And when we get to our 4 final songs, I'm going to ask you, in the middle of the songs, to shout and cheer and make noises. Because it's supposed to happen today. And at the end of every song, I want you to clap and shout and cheer. Just because it's supposed to happen today. And in the song where you begin to realize God is speaking to you, I want you to raise your hand. Just because it's supposed to happen today. And eventually one of these moments, extravagance, will become part of your soul as well. So that you can express maybe just a tiny little bit of David. You don't have to strip naked and dance around this building. Please don't. I will let you dance a little bit. We got a little room over here if you want to just kind of boogie. But, you know, my journey, and this will be the last thing I say, so then we'll go to our time of reflection. But my journey of music culminated in 8th grade. where the school began to introduce a band. In 8th grade, I got disgusted by it. I was like, what is all this silliness? Spending so much effort on all this pointless music stuff. And in 9th grade, I began to have a change of heart, not towards music, but towards God. And I said, God, I want more than anything to know what it means just to love you. I spent evenings in prayer asking for God to just reveal to me, let me know what it means to love Him. And I made a commitment at one point in time that if God brought an opportunity my way, I would take that opportunity. And then for half of the 9th grade year, I spent every one of those chapels just hating the band on stage. In fact, the band was composed of people that I knew, guys that were sort of friends of mine, that I could not believe they were making such fools of themselves in front of the whole group of students. They were up there playing guitars and keyboards, and there was a drummer, and then Mrs. Haskins was all off to the side, playing the piano with one hand, while the other hand was all up in the air and her eyes were closed. And I remember saying to God at that moment, I said, God, I will never do anything so silly. So pointless. And I imagine God took notes. At that moment in time, I was like, we'll just see about that. About a couple months later, I realized that music was an opportunity that God had brought to me, and I wasn't taking advantage of it. And I said to God, listen, I don't know, and I don't care anymore. Here's the song. I'm just going to sing it. And I decided at that moment I was just going to surrender to the singing of the song. The song was, as the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul longs for you. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. Psalm 42. And as I sang the song, for the first time not worrying about the craziness and the pointlessness of the music, and just singing it, the words of the psalmist, written thousands of years before, expressed exactly the desire of my heart to know God more deeply. And everything changed for me. That one moment began with me saying, I'm just going to sing. And to tell you the truth, I fear what might have happened in my life if I hadn't in that one moment said, God, I'll just sing. I don't know what God might do in your life or my life, but when we surrender ourselves to Him, whether it's in music or anything else, God responds. And He reaches out to us and He says, I love that. So I want us right now to prepare our hearts for a moment. I'm asking you to bow your heads and just ask God, God, have I been holding back when it comes to offering myself to you in worship? Have I been using music as its own tool, or have I been using music as a tool to be extravagant before you, God? And take just a moment of silence. I invite you to reflect, jot some things down on the card, or spend a moment in prayer asking God. And then we are going to get loud.
Thank you for listening to this message from Lafayette Community Church. We believe that God has a full and fulfilling life in store for you, and we want to help you live it. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, Pastor Jeff, through the web form at LafayetteCommunityChurch.com. And as always, I encourage you to plug into a solid, God-honoring community wherever you may be. Life is a journey, and no one should ever walk alone.